to rise to that level of love that we sometimes claim we have. And when stuff happens, we have to say, do I have it? Do I have it? So let me kind of like set the tone here. When I was asked to speak, and I mentally said, God, what in the world would I talk about? And only one thing came to mind, and it was the spiritual leader's cup. And I'm like, well, what is a spiritual leader's cup? And of course, Spirit says, Jesus said to James and John, the sons of Zebedee, are you able to drink of the cup that I shall drink of, and to be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? They said unto him, we are able. The reason why there's a pause for a little laughter is because when we got the call, did we not say, I'm able, I can do this? And then we decided, oh my goodness, maybe I need a little bit of tutoring, a little bit of education. So God said, yeah, go, do that, that's fine. Yet we said we are able. Then he said unto them, you shall drink indeed of my cup, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. You find this at Matthew 20, 22, and 23. So keep that as the scripture basis of this spiritual leadership. I looked up what Charles Fillmore considers to be the cup that we have based in this particular chapter. He says, this particular scripture, he says, to drink of the cup means to take in faith. Believing before one can fully understand. So when we step into spiritual leadership, it is done from a place of faith. Faith in something because we don't know what we're really getting into. Oh yeah, we looked at others doing this thing, but that was their thing. We didn't know what our thing would be and what it would look like because it hadn't happened yet. So we start being baptized in what is a spiritual leadership. Now, I want to thank the INTA board for inviting me to speak and to present this. I want to thank the committee for having confidence that I could say something. And I want to thank you for being open and willing to allow the Spirit to say, pick your own topic. Pick your own topic. Because after I submitted what my title would be, I said, God, you don't know what you're talking about here because I don't know. And all I can do is just go on a little bit of stuff that I think I know. So I want us to come together. Let's reason together on this. Are you open for that?
Yeah.
My favorite quote from Carl Jung is this: the meeting, the coming together of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both will be transformed. Are you in for a transformative experience? Are you?
Yeah.
I mean, I have to hear you because I need to know that we're in this together. All right, because right now we're going to come together. We're going to think into the mind of God here. We are going to pull forward. So how many of you are spiritual leaders? How many are ministers, practitioners, teachers, students? We're all spiritual leaders. Because at some point in time, during this walk of spirit, you will lead somebody. But how do you lead? As a spiritual leader, what is it that you bring to your community? What is it that you bring? Oh, no thoughts. How about you bring your character? What are some of your characteristics? If you have a letter of call, somebody saw that you had a certain characteristic that would actually serve that community. So what are some of your characteristics that you know you have and you place them right there in your spiritual community? Mine is strong-willed.
Yes,
I know that. I know that. I had to own it.
Yeah.
And I could say there's another one. Are you ready to hear it?
Yep.
I'm authoritarian. And I became an authoritarian because I hated to be wrong. I really hated to be wrong. I wanted to know what the mind of God was, and I wanted to know what God was within me, and I wanted to know how I would be able to serve someone to understand what God is within them. Another thing that we bring to our spiritual communities are our unique gifts, those gifts and talents that we have to do certain things. Those gifts are innate qualities within us, and we can do them with our eyes shut, and it just seems to work. I have a crazy one. If I have something in my hand, or if there's something near me and it's about to fall, for some reason I can catch it. Isn't that a crazy talent?
It's a graceful talent.
But it's wonderful. It's mine. But there's another thing that I have developed in terms of what I consider to be a spiritual gift is after I learned to meditate, after I learned to sit in the quiet, after I learned to be in spiritual communion and fellowship and relationship with the infinite, I became a bit knowledgeable and knowing. I stopped fearing stuff that was before me because I wasn't the authority on it. So I was able to surrender being the authoritarian and to look for something else. And what was that something else that I began to experience? There's this thing that Ernest Holmes really has brought to our forefront for us to understand. It's a principle. It's the principle of divine guidance. It says this, and repeat after me. Seek guidance.
Seek guidance.
It will be given.
It will be given.
Just as simple as that. If you ask for guidance, it will be given. Every time. Now, it's important for us to understand this concept of the divine guidance simply because we have a one-on-one relationship with the infinite spirit of life. There's all infinite intelligence there. There is all of the limitless wisdom of life, of the universe there. Everything you need. And this divine mind is operating from what? The law of cause and effect. So it's going to give you some guidance. So as a leader, we have to get to a place where we learn to release, let go, and be willing to know that right where I am, the Spirit of God is with me. How many of you have told your congregations? How many of you have told people that you're working with? Trust God. Trust God. We're asking people to allow their faith to go forward, but that doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen all the time. Something else goes forward. I want to give you a definition of spiritual leadership that my colleague and fellow minister, Jim Lockhart, shares with us. And he wrote this in his book. It's a new book entitled Creating the Beloved Community. He says the primary role of a spiritual leader, one who has prepared himself or herself for such a role through rigorous study and practice, is to guide those in the community through the inevitable periods of dissonance in life. It is also to help people to recognize that a spiritual approach to life, while not preventing disharmony, does offer a way through to greater harmony. This spiritual leader does this through teaching the philosophy of the community, and most importantly, by being a living example of one who has integrated the philosophy into her or his life in a visible way. End quote. That sounds like stuff that we have to do. That sounds a whole lot like stuff that we have to do. And there's another quote that I want to share with you, and it comes from Parker Palmer. And this is like a little caution that we should apply to ourselves as leaders. A leader must take special responsibility for what's going on inside his or herself. Inside his or her consciousness, lest the act of leadership create more harm than good. Can I get a hallelujah?
Yeah. Hallelujah.
Oh, I know. Thank you. I thank you, because sometimes as new ministers, we can go in and not having a sense of the community, the people that we are serving, and we can cause more damage. We see people leaving the church. We see people hurting, and we don't know what to do. And one of the things that I'm aware of, whether you are a leader in a spiritual community or a leader in your local community or a leader someplace in some community, is that you have to be sensitive and aware of who you are working with, who you are serving, and how you can serve them. Spiritual leadership. So what's in this cup? What's in this cup? First and foremost, faith. But I want to go outside of the spiritual realm here, being a spiritual leader. And I want to tell you about an experience that I had working for the Environmental Protection Agency, and the activity was involving being involved with the community. I convened a meeting with members of the Navajo tribe, chapter meeting, and we were dealing with a mining company in their area, and they were asking for our help to deal with the water rights issues and pollution and so forth and so on from mining activities. And here I am in a place where it was dark because the meeting was at night. It was way out in the rural area, and I was by myself. I did not have a co-worker with me. So I was in the loving care of God and the goodwill of the people there. In addition to the members of that chapter being present, they invited the environmental activists to come in. They invited the newspapers reporters to come in. They invited the mining company to come into the meeting. I went there with an expectation that we were going to have dialogue. We were just going to have dialogue. But this was one of those knocked down, dragged out spiritual. I know I was about to say that word. It was not the spirit of love that was running around that we love to experience. But you have seen some of this on television. People standing up, being disrespectful to one another and talking and going on. So here's my story. As I was standing before the group and I was sharing a bit of information, the reporter comes in with this photographer. And then the reporter took a seat. The photographer did not. The photographer walked from the back of the room all the way and stood in front of me with his camera and flash, and proceeded to flash, 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 flash in my face. And I didn't know what to do. This is where divine guidance comes in. Place it under contemporary applications of spiritual principle, because we have to be in the streets. I stood there and I bowed my head and I said, said, dear God, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. You've got to help me. And it was no sooner that I stopped speaking within, I heard, be still. So I stood there. And this photographer kept flashing and flashing. And I began to notice that the room was getting quieter and quieter. And finally, it was completely quiet. Nobody was talking. And he eventually stopped flashing that camera in my face and went to his seat. And once he did that, I opened my eyes and I surveyed the room. Everybody was in their place, and we were able to proceed with the meeting. Divine guidance. Where you place your attention, God's attention is there. We as spiritual leaders need to know that. We must know this. And we must understand that any belief that we have that there isn't a power or intelligence that can help us find a way of escape is an erroneous thought. We must understand that we are in partnership with the divine at all times. Ernest Holmes wrote this wonderful little essay, God and Company. And it's about you and your relationship with God, knowing that God is always there as the infinite intelligence, as the guidance that you need in every moment. Once you ask the question, help me, oh God, God helps. It doesn't mean that you have to tell Spirit what to do. You have to be willing to open your mind and your heart to allow that good to happen. So that's just one way of looking at spiritual leadership. But I have to continue on this pathway of, contemporary applications, being out in the street, being out in our communities, because we are in a time now where stuff is always happening. We're in a crisis situation. We see these not only on television, we see them in our local communities.
Amen.
And we see them in our churches. Did anyone hear of one particular ministry in Texas where somebody ran off with the cash that was collected from that day's offering?
Ooh.
They ran off with the cash. They ran off with the cash. What do we as spiritual leaders do? Do we roll down in the flow crying and lamenting and all of this? Do we experience F-E-A-R?
Tad.
Do we have angst and anxiety? I was flying into Phoenix. Southwest has a reputation of nice soft landings. We hit the runway, bam. It was like metal scraping on concrete. I felt a jar in my spinal column. And I thought, oh my God, I wasn't ready to go yet. We hadn't had that discussion. But the point is that stuff happens, and this thing of fear can easily come upon us. Why? Because fear lets you know that something is wrong. When fear shows up, it can be perceived or real, but it's like your security, part of your safety net, something that was part of the totality of your security has been ripped. There's been a tear. In Northern California this year, October 2017, for almost a complete month, there were these wildfires, 250 wildfires. Over 90,000 people had to evacuate their homes. 8,500 buildings were destroyed. 240,000 acres burned. Many communities were completely leveled from the fire. This was really significant because this was the largest wildfire in the Northern California area. Now this is significant to us for Northern California because that's the wine country. That's the wine country. situation of purchasing land for a winery.
That's right.
So fear can come upon us. But what is the impact of that fear? It holds people in hostage. But love conquers fear.
Come on now.
That is what our teaching is. That is what the scripture tells us. Love conquers fear. So how are you, the community spiritual leader, supposed to deal with this horrific issue that is before you when people in your center have lost their homes? You've opened the door to your center so they have a place to live. How do you deal with, my church has become a place where people has to stay because they don't have anywhere to go? How do you deal with, oh my goodness, we have the crying children because they're out of their comfort zone? What do you do with older people who are out of the comfort zone where they have everything that they need to make their lives worth and easy right there? It's no longer there. What do you do when an entire family just has lost everything? What do you do? Do you immediately say, oh, come on in now. Come on in. I got some scriptures for you. I want to tell you what God had to say. Come on in. I got a word. I got the word of God. I got God's word for you. That word is for you right now. No. No. Do like Jesus. Meet people where they are.
That's right.
Don't worry about the Bible. Meet people where they are. Because what we have within us is that we know that the law of love flows easily and effortlessly through us as we allow it to do. So open the door. Come on in. Come on in. Invite people to just come on in and give them love. One of the things that we as spiritual leaders know is that people need to know that they're loved, that you care about them, and that you will be available to support them as well as you can. And I would say on the other side of this, we as spiritual leaders have to know what our capabilities are. And we have to know that even though we are spiritual beings, we are having a human experience just like the people that are in this crisis situation.
Amen.
And we have to understand that if some of what their need requirement is not something that we're able to do, look into your resource book to find who can provide that kind of support. You don't have to do it all. God has made the way. Open up your book and find who has the capability and invite them to participate. Now, I'm talking about love. I'm talking about love because when we're showing that love, we are convicted within ourselves. We're convinced within ourselves that these teachings that we have been living by are alive, well, and they work. Ernest Holmes says, prove it. If you are working with any particular principle, any particular law, you must learn to know that law and learn how it works so that you can use it effectively, and it blesses you when you know how to use it. Let's not misuse the law, because sometimes you might get hurt. Your feelings could get hurt. In Las Vegas, many people lost their lives from a senseless act. Many people were injured because of a senseless act. What do you say to the families of those people? What do you say? Walter Brueggemann, nice theologian, and he has taught many ministers about using their abilities to speak as if they are speaking the word of God, the mind of God to people. What would God say about this situation? And then on the other side of the coin, you also speak to the people to allow the people to begin to understand their feelings such that we're letting God know how we feel about this. But here's something that I love. I love Psalms 27. Does anybody know Psalms 27?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, tell me, what does Psalms 27 say?
I have to read it.
The Lord is my light
And my salvation.
and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? The circumstances and the conditions that begin to present themselves are just that. Their circumstances and their conditions. When you know the law and apply the law, you can begin to change those conditions to ones that are more to your liking. It is the proper use of the spiritual laws that gets rid of the ugly facts, the alternative facts, and bring the truth to the forefront for us. Spiritual leadership. So the topic for this entire session is community power. And it's about how we as spiritual leaders help the community to recapture their inner guidance system. Of course, we tell people, let's pray. Of course, we tell people, here's an affirmation for you. Of course, we invite people into the spiritual mind treatment, the prayer closet. But we also invite people into love. And one of the most important things that we as spiritual leaders can do is to go in prayer and allow love to permeate every part of your being. Because every time you meet one at the door, you extend that love. Oh, I just love Eddie Watkins. He says, I am the place where God shows up. It doesn't matter if you're in the spiritual community or in your local community or in your house. Where love is needed, allow that love to flow through you. Love is a great healer. So being the midwife and the facilitator of helping people to come out of this place of fear and back to this place of faith takes work on our part just as well. Get ourselves in order. Let us remember who we are in spirit. We have that one-on-one relationship. We have a direct connection with the infinite. We speak our word, and the word becomes flesh when we properly use that word. I love Ernest Holmes. There's a power in the universe, and it's available for you to use it. And I want to expand it like Reverend Michael Beckwith, because we're spiritual leaders, and it can use us too.
That's right.
So what is the power? What's in your cup? What's in your cup? I'm going to leave that question with you. But because I feel this within myself, I have to sing this song. And if you know it, sing it with me. Love lifted me. Love lifted me when nothing else would help. Love lifted me. Love lifted me. Love lifted me when nothing else would help. God's love lifted